Please welcome our moderator, Bapak Philips J. Vermonte, Senior Fellow, CSIS Indonesia. And please join me in welcoming Bapak Jonathan Tan Gitiong, Head Culture and Information Division, Sustainable Development Directorate, ASEAN Secretariat. And please join me in welcoming Bapak Yoga Sangkan Prasetya, Coordinator for Economic Cooperation, Center of International Affairs, Ministry of Communications and Informatics of the Republic of Indonesia. And we would like to invite Bapak Jean-Jacques Wang, Asia Pacific Information Policy Lead and Global Telecommunications Policy Lead Google. Please join us on the stage. And we also would like to invite Bapak Miklos Gaspar, Director UN Information Center. Please give a big round of applause. We would like to invite Ibu Anita Wahid, Advisor of Public Virtue Institute. And last but not least, we would like to invite Bapak Prasetya Dwi Cahya, COO Think Policy and Co-Head Bijak Demokrasi. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to proceed the panel discussion. So to the Bapak Philips, our moderator, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Very good afternoon, everyone. Philip Vermonte is my name, and I got the honor to chair this panel discussion. So the purpose of this panel is to deepen and then to get some views coming out from our speakers today, to extend our understanding of what have been presented by SAIL research team, as well as from our keynote speakers earlier this morning. And later on, I will invite a discussion, Bang Andy Bayuni from the floor, to comment on all of these ideas coming out of this session. And I think we have a set of speakers that represent those who are working at the global level, from the UN office, from ASEAN, regional level, and then the Indonesian government and the civil society, as well as the private sectors. And then if we think linearly, we would think that we need to ask down from the global, coming from the top, that is at the global level, to down to the national level, or vice versa. But I received the order from the terms of reference that is, kind of a mixing up. Started with our speaker, Pak Jonathan Tan Gitiong of the ASEAN Secretariat first, so I will not change the order that I'm receiving from the terms of reference, but then we will discuss the matter simultaneously. Now, Pak Jonathan, and before I start, I apologize to all speakers that we have limited time. We only have about 1 hour with 6 speakers and 1 discussion. So, I'll ask you to solve this global problem of disinformation in 5 minutes each to respond to my question. Now, Pak Jonathan, we've been talking about this regional level approach to combat misinformation and disinformation. And we learned this morning as well, and you are fully aware of this, that ASEAN now has the guideline on management of government information and combating fake news and disinformation in the media. Now, in your view, how would our regional organization, as well as our region, to do more in attacking this problem?
So, a very good morning, and thank you very much, Philips, for that question there. I will try to keep myself brief here. But first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank CSIS and Google for extending an invitation to the ASEAN Secretariat to attend this dialogue. I think to the question about what we can do at the regional level, I would like to just highlight very briefly here that the efforts to fight disinformation has been sustained over the last, I would say, almost 7 years, since 2017, when we have had the ministerial roundtable discussing fake news in the Philippines. And even last year itself, in September, when the guideline, as Philip has mentioned earlier, was adopted by the ASEAN ministers responsible for information, we also, the ministers themselves, when we had that discussion in September last year in Da Nang, Vietnam, they discussed at length on the concerns and the aggravating situations about disinformation and misinformation. And that discussion itself also led to an outcome document called the Vision Statement for 2030, where it underlines, I think, 3 key components. First, it's that there is a need for us to inculcate a greater culture of critical thinking amongst the netizens. And second, it's really to optimize the use of technology and its tools to capacitate the media as a trusted channels to deliver information in the most accurate and timely manner. And last but not least, also emphasizing on the targeted as well as evidence-based approaches that we need to take, especially in terms of driving strategic and public communications. And with that, I would also like to share with you that 2 years ago, ASEAN actually formed a task force on fake news. We call them the ASEAN Task Force on Fake News, TFFN for short. And this fake news task force was actually made up of a tripartite representations of the government officials, fact checkers, and representatives from the media sector. I would like to see, as we further, engage different stakeholders, that we would like to also open up to create regular interfaces with other important stakeholders like the CSOs and, of course, with the think tanks and researchers as well. And therefore, I do think that this Sail Safer Internet Lab initiative is indeed very significant, because I think it underlines the importance of multi-stakeholder conversations on fighting fake news, for one. And of course, that it also illustrates that governments themselves cannot work in silo to address this issue about fighting fake news, given that the pace, the volume, the reach, and the efficacy of fake news as a result of generative AI has been in such a has led us to such a situation whereby I don't think that any single party is able to manage and mitigate, the effects of fake news by themselves. And therefore, it calls for a more coordinated, multi-stakeholder approach. And I would also like to add that it's also very important that if you look at the World Economic Forum report that was put out this year, where misinformation and disinformation was actually identified as the most severe threat in the next 2 years, and will remain so for the next 10 years, I think this really resonates with many of us who work in this space, that there is really a need for us to continue to foster a greater multi-stakeholder conversations in this regard. Yeah. So I think I will just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Jonathan. That was Pak Jonathan Tan Ji Seong. He's the head of the Culture and Information Division, Sustainable Development Directorate at the ASEAN Secretariat. Thank you, Pak Jonathan, for highlighting some aspects that happening at the regional level, which I think Indonesia, then I'll go to Pak Yoga Sangkan Prasetya, Coordinator for Economic Cooperation, Center for International Affairs, our Ministry of Communication and Informatics of the Republic of Indonesia. Now, speaking about the regional level, and we know earlier, Pak Karan from Google highlighting the leadership role of Indonesia, that the international community, at least at the regional level, expects Indonesia, given the size of the population and so on. And Ibu Ida earlier also cited the fact that we have about 79% of internet penetration. So given all these reasons, Indonesia become very important in implementing the guidelines. Now, if I may ask, are we investing on implementing all these efforts to combat and to tackle the problem of misinformation and disinformation? Are there any buy-ins in our government? It's not the sole responsibility of your ministry. It has to be a multi-stakeholders approach and so on. So if you could highlight, if you could enlighten us on what the Indonesian government, can do and can do more.
Thank you, and very good morning for everybody over here. So, and then also thank you for SAIL and also CSIS and also Google for giving me the chance to speak this morning. So it's a good thing for become me because what? Because these guidelines has already introduced by the Secretary General Bu Ida, you, Pak Philips, and also Mr. Jonathan. So this is me here to be complementing the what is the ASEAN guideline. So for your information is that you can just download because it is public, and then you can just see all the details of these guidelines. Okay, so let's start with let me start with the reason behind why Indonesia, at that time in 2023, as the chairpersonships of the ASEAN, initiates this guideline. So we see that the misinformation, disinformations, fake news, negative contents is crucial to be tackled. This is like something that important and this is necessary for us to be aware of. Because what? Because this issue is not only for not making any productivity, but also counterproductive. So that means that people and then this content, rather than this connectivity, also impacts to the productivity itself, as we see that the connectivity is not only relying on the infrastructure, but also the person itself. So that's why making a good content, making a positive content is really beneficial. However, in the context of the regionalism in Asia, the standards of misinformation, disinformations, and fake news is different. So if you compare this country to another country, they have like a set of different mechanism, bureaucracy, mitigations, and everything. So that is why, that's the reason why we need to set with one documents that can be a guidelines. So actually this is not a binding, but every country can look at this and then they can transfer it and then they can adapt it to their each of their regulations, and then they can follow the instructions. Because what? Because these guidelines is really complete. So it started from how to identify, how to combating the fake news, and also how to make the counter text to counter the negative content itself. And the other one, they can have like the recommendations for every country. So that is why these guidelines also opens for another initiatives by another ASEAN countries, which is Malaysia. Malaysia by this year, correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Jonathan, Malaysia this year also taking relay of the guidelines by trying to introduce the guidelines for the social media usage in ASEAN. And then this project should be ended by 2025, should be finalized by 2025, and producing another one. So what we see over here that this is sets of relaying objectives and then relaying stakeholders that we want to initiate. The ASEAN guideline itself is started by the government. So the subject of these guidelines is for the government. So what we see over here that because what? Because government that has the regulatory, that they have like the policy making, and also they just control this contents over the media. So that's why we see that this is the very first thing that we need to manage. After that, the next one is the society itself. So this is like the second series of these guidelines by the Malaysia. And then what's the next impact for Indonesia itself? Of course, that these guidelines implements and also complements the current policies, which is Indonesia, the digital literacy from the Kominfo, and also for the digital talent scholarship and also digital leadership academies. That's the pyramids of the digital literacy in Indonesia. It's also complement to that. And then for the other one is that Indonesia has also benefits as the implementing countries for this is that there are several of the seminars. The first seminar is in the March 2024, and then the second one is in the October 2024. So this seminar is also open for public, and then every stakeholders that involved in this guidelines can also join with that. This is the one that we can give you the information for now, Pak Philips, and then, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yoga. Now, I'm going to our next speaker, Jean-Jacques from Google, and then I've been a firm believer that tech companies really has a very significant role to play, because all of this come through the platform of this technology. And of course, there are governments and civil society and so on, but it's happening in the platform. And then now with AI and then all this new development, how would you provide some perspective on this? How Google, of course, we've heard for Pak Karan earlier, but it is time to deepen Google perspective on this. How are we going to tackle this use and abuse of internet and now with AI in combating misinformation and disinformation?
Thank you. We've got limited time. I could speak for many hours about this, but I'll try to keep it short. I think as Karan was alluding, we're looking at this through broadly 3 pillars on how to fight misinformation. The first one is the one that everybody thinks about, I guess, which is about countering disinformation in particular, the intentional sharing of false information, right? Taking it down. Then you've got delivering credible, reliable information, and that's key. You can't just take things down. You have to also have good, real stuff out there. And then the final thing is that we need to partner to get maximum effect. So let me dig a little bit deeper into each of those 3. In terms of countering, of course, it's a mix of technical solutions and people, processes, reviewing flags, for instance, from users, or removals for requests from governments that inform us when we're seeing harmful content on our platform, or illegal content in the case of government removal requests. And the technology is an interesting one, because obviously it never stops, but we were seeing AI, and it's true that AI presents risks, but in this field it's also quite inspiring. It's got a lot of potential to help us to fight attackers much more effectively. What we're seeing and what we're starting to use, you heard the numbers, for instance, for the number of ads that we removed last year, over 200 million. Actually, that's a vast improvement and increase compared to the previous year, and that's because we've started using LLMs much more, so AI tools. We've been using machine learning for a long, long time to help us to sort of moderate, to analyze content at scale and identify bad content at scale, because we receive literally hundreds of thousands of requests every day to review bad content. But now really AI is maximizing our power to detect bad stuff. But not just that, it's also that once we analyze it, once we're identifying bad content, we're also able to come up much faster with a response or a set of responses. So, and we're just at the beginning of this, and it's useful for mis and disinformation, but also more broadly for how we look at cyber safety and cyber security. So we're quite excited about the potential of AI to help us in these challenges. And maybe if I move on to the second one, which I think a lot of people, when they think about illegal content and misinformation, forget, which is it shouldn't be about taking content down. That's a very blunt tool in many ways. You can, especially if you think about mis and disinformation, there's always the risk that you take content down that's actually real. That you do need good information out there. You don't want to breach people's freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, etc. And perhaps overall, more importantly, you will only win this fight against bad actors who are spreading disinformation if there is good, reliable, authoritative information out there. And that's why we try to do this on our own products by trying to provide more context to users. So for instance, when you go on YouTube, you do a search for a particular video, you'll get a number of results. Depending on the type of topic, you might get specific suggestions from more reputed organizations like the BBC, organizations that have been set up for a while. or the UN in some cases. For instance, if we think about COVID, for instance, we had the World Health Organization. We could point people to that when they were making searches on Google Search or on YouTube for sources of information. We do need those authoritative sources out there. We do need to motivate the creation of good sources, and that's why you heard earlier about the Google News Initiative and training journalists. We are training them, for things like being better able to analyze information and to do fact-checking themselves. But importantly, what a big part of the Google News Initiative is to train journalists to be much more digitally savvy, so that they know how to maximize their use of digital tools, they know how to rank their articles higher on Google Search, and so we can have those quality, traditional, authentic media represented properly on the internet and giving users much more context, being able to apply critical thinking. So I'm trying to rush through, and I'll be happy to come back in Q&A. And then perhaps just finishing with perhaps the most important one, because it's underpinning it all, which is partnering, right? And you're right, we're thinking about online misinformation and disinformation, but it's part of a broader spectrum, right? I mean, propaganda has been there since pretty much the first time that humans started living in society, right? So we've been living with this for thousands of years. Now we've got the situation has morphed, taken advantage of new technologies, which is what bad actors have been doing forever, taking advantage of new technologies. So we need to comprehend that. We need to come together. And so there's various strands with it, partnerships. The one that we've mentioned already, that is quite obvious, I think, to all of us, is awareness raising. So we do a bit of awareness raising ourselves. Karen was talking about the campaigns that we've run on, like the heat pause on YouTube, for instance. But in order to get to so many more communities on the ground, we need to partner with local organizations. That's what we've done really well here in Indonesia, both to sort of educate users, educators, so they can train students themselves, but also, again, a bit like we've done with journalists, we've helped some communities to understand better how they can use the digital tools and tell their own stories, so that you kind of counter the false narratives with real stuff. So that's on the kind of awareness-raising front, and with we've got many partnerships already. We're very glad with that, including with the ASEAN Foundation. We've done an APAC-wide, ASEAN-wide program, and that's continuing on online safety and misinformation. And we'd love to do more. We need to do more, including on sort of emerging or rapidly increasing threats like scams and fraud, which has just skyrocketed since COVID. We really do need to make a dent, and user awareness is going to be a major pillar, right? It's not going to solve everything, but it will be, it's a major foundation that we need to get. Research is the other one. Again, we really do need to understand what's happening. I've been very impressed by the work that Belsazar and others at SAIL have been doing over the past year, really trying to understand both how users are impacted and then trying to really sort of unpick how the bad actors are working. Because the best way we understand how they're working, the best we'll find the right inflection points for us to counter the problems. And same thing with the related problems of scams and misinformation, and I'm really glad that SAIL is starting this new research work stream that's going to look at deepfake and scams, so we can really understand how the bad actors are working technically and also in terms of spreading their bad messages, and we can, again, find the right ways together to make a dent in it. I think that's probably, I'll just finish off with just a general thing about dialogue and multi-stakeholder dialogue. I think it's well accepted that we need to have a multi-stakeholder dialogue, but I think it's probably not mainstreamed in reality. We need to make it happen much more. So there's a bit with ASEAN. I think we can do more, maybe use ASEAN even more as a platform. I think what we see with Check Factor and similar initiatives in other countries is that the fact-checking organizations, when they're well set up, can themselves become a platform to gather industries, various government agencies and others. So there's this ongoing dialogue, understanding, and then coming together in practical initiatives. So I think there's room to do far, far more there. I'm really excited about that. And events like this can help us to spur that even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. That was Jean-Jacques, Asia Pacific Information Policy Lead and Global Telecommunication Policy Lead at Google. Now, I'm going to Pak Miklos from the, he's the director of UN Information Center here. In terms of setting up global norms and combating this global problem of misinformation and disinformation, could you update us on where are we right now? Are we nearing, to achieving some sort of global norms? And if yes, then what can we do? If not, why and what can we do? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Pa Philips, and good. I'm not sure if it's morning or afternoon at this point. I prepared some slides, but in the interest of time, you'll find those with all the materials of this event. I just want to run through a few points quickly. So we've heard this morning many terms: misinformation, disinformation, fake news, hoax, which is a term in Indonesia is used often. For the UN, there are really three terms, and John already alluded to the key difference. Misinformation is false information that's spread by mistake, because somebody doesn't know better. So it's not good, but okay, well, mistakes happen. Disinformation is incorrect information that's spread on purpose to cause harm. And then there's hate speech. And hate speech is when, where really the point is to cause harm, and that's when it is the most important that action is taken. We've also heard from some of the speakers this morning, and also now on the panel, that in ASEAN, just 10 countries, they all have different approaches to this. So imagine the UN with 193 countries. So no, Philips, there are not going to be global norms. Why? Because you know how long it takes, how many years it takes to negotiate a binding international treaty, right? Perhaps some of you have followed the news. Just the World Health Organization has been trying to put forward a treaty in the wake of COVID, and even that, at least so far, has not been possible. So here, the UN has decided not to do a treaty, but instead put forward what we call global principles on information integrity. These are best practices that we hope, many governments and then also platforms and media organizations will sign up for. And once they've done that, then, the rest of us can call them to account in case they don't adhere to these principles. For instance, in case a platform does not do enough to combat hate speech. Or if a government uses policies to regulate online safety in order to actually, cut free speech. So there are several principles in these underlying this approach, and the latest I heard, still being negotiated by governments, but it's going to be launched later in June. So later this month, these global principles will be out, and then they will be part of the Summit of the Future, which is this major conference that the UN is organizing for September, to look at the future, the multilateral system governments or countries want over the longer term. So one key, I just want to highlight one key recommendation from these global principles, because that's for platforms. And so much of what we talked about today was for platforms. And that is transparency to data, so that researchers like CSIS would have access for free to basic data on how information spreads via a particular platform. And that this way, platforms could indeed be a lot easier to call into account when it comes to spread of misinformation, disinformation, and particularly hate speech. Indonesia, so what's in this for Indonesia? First of all, there was a global consultation done at the end of last year on what stakeholders in different countries would like to see in these global principles. And we led that at UN in Indonesia, here for Indonesians, and we had people from Cominfo, academia, including CSIS, the media companies, and also CSOs, and then a lot of that feedback was fed into the preparation of these global principles. Now, for Indonesia, let's say for the government, if it signs up to these principles, it will be useful because it can use it as a basis for any new legislation or decrees that it wants to put forward, to show that these are indeed based on international best practices which want to walk that fine line between combating misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech, and at the same time not curtailing freedom of expression and free speech. Another way this can be useful is that, you know, in this conference we heard from Google, but all the social media platforms are present in Indonesia, part of our lives. As we heard, 90-some% of Indonesia's over 200 million internet users use social media. In our humble experience at the UN, many of these platforms have not been very cooperative when it came to combating concrete cases of misinformation and disinformation and hate speech. Frankly, in Indonesia, we got very little feedback. We had to go to the regional and sometimes to the global offices for anything to happen. So once these companies also sign up to these global principles, then again, it's going to be easier to get something done when somebody, you know, a CSO or an activist can prove that certain action taken by some users actually runs counter to not just the global principles, but also to the user roles of the companies themselves. So to sum up, I do hope that this is going to be issued in June. There'll be many, many countries, as well as private actors that will sign up to this, and it's going to be, you know, yet another and really important piece in the puzzle in our toolkit to fight misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Miklos. Now I'm going to Ibu Anita Wahid of the Public Virtue Research Institute. Earlier this morning, Pak Karan Bhatia made a statement that Indonesia's plural society can actually be the source of strength to combat this misinformation and disinformation. And I think it struck me because maybe most of us used to think that because we are so diverse, and then we are very prone to misinformation and disinformation, given the various interests and various views among the society. What's your take on this fact that Indonesia, being a plural society, can be used as a model to fight against misinformation and disinformation? I know you have a lot of experience working on this, at the grassroots level, and then it would be nice if you can, share your experience with us here.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Philip. Thank you for having me in SAIL. I am Indonesian, so I'm calling it SAIL, not SAIL. Also, before I answer your question, I just want to apologize because I've been having fever since yesterday, and I hope that none of it will affect this conversation. But actually, your question was actually very different than the one that I was given, so I might as well just throw this out. My notes is out the window. So I would answer that question by saying yes and no. In one point, it is true by what was being said that the diversity in Indonesia, as well in Southeast Asia in this case, is actually a strength. If we know how to use it, if we understand the values behind it, if we understand the foundations of those of the values and norms that actually create that diversity. But if we mishandle that becomes a problem. Because it becomes one of the things that actually can be weaponized for political contestation, ideological contestation, and for weapons of conflicts. In the history of Indonesia, if ever since it hasn't even been called Indonesia, most of the major conflicts in Indonesia was started and or followed by disinformation. And most of them are actually related to the things that we are calling identity issues, which I would say I would like to backtrack a little bit why this identity issue becomes like a very difficult issues in terms of how we handle how we create issues in Indonesia and conflicts as well, is because part of the reason of why these are becoming kind of conflicts, because it becomes something that when we feel that it's threatened, there are so many emotions that come out of us. Who we are as a human being in this region is particularly depend on who we identify with, which group, with which ethnic groups are we identifying with, which religion are we identifying ourselves with, which social status or strata that we identify ourselves with. And if we feel that there is some sort of a perceived threats towards that identity, then we feel that we are feeling threatened, we are feeling suspicious of others, we are feeling very worried, we are feeling very, very easily angry, easily accusing other people, which in a very complex situations, it's also very easy for us to do actions of othering to other groups. These actions of othering means that whoever is not included as part of my group is different, therefore they are enemies. And this becomes very susceptible to be weaponized, especially if there had been historically conflicts that's related to this. And in the case of Indonesia, we've seen that quite a lot of conflicts in the beginning, since the beginning of the digital technological development, has been using these issues for weapons. And I think it's not only becoming weapons of ideological contestation or weapons of political contestations, but it's also becoming a way to actually maintain hatred by anyone who feels that they will benefit in the future by playing these issues. So from time to time, even though it's seemingly peaceful at the surface, but below it's very, very vulnerable. Just one splash of misinformation or disinformation about the other groups, it will create like a huge conflict in just seconds. But the way, one of the other problems is also because of the way state handle this issue. Somewhat there is this pressure of having a social harmony that forces the government to actually, not only government, but also the law enforcement to actually handle it by ways of let's just keep the peace so that one of the conflicting groups need to ngalah, or let it go for the benefit of for the benefit of the greater goods, which in fact, in a way, yes, it worked. It will deflate the potential conflict, but at the same time, never actually handle the conflict. In the case of Indonesia, it's usually the minority groups that is being forced to let the stuff go, and they had their rights of living, of practicing their faith, and every other things threatened. Their human rights are basically not protected at all by the way the state approached this issue of social harmonization. I think so far, let's stop there,
right.
and maybe we can continue in the discussion.
Thank you, Mbak Anita, for highlighting the fact that many times we do not attack the root cause of the problem, and then we need to do more in terms of better handling our diversity, so that what Pak Karan Bhatia stated earlier could come true. And I think it is a strength. Diversity is actually the strength. And I agree with you if we know how to handle this. Right. Now, I'd like to ask Pak Prastya Dwi Cahya of the Think Policy and of Bijak Democracy. This is a short question but probably requires a long answer, but you only have 5 minutes. How can we mainstream political literacy education? Pak Jonathan earlier highlighted, and then Pak Miklos as well, the role of critical thinking and the role of, I'm not saying self-censorship, but understanding what we are spreading and what we are informing other or fellow citizens. But how can we mainstream this political literacy education to the masses?
Thank you so much, Pak Philip. Such a short questions for quite long answer, I think. And I would like to also share a little bit about our organizations, because the context of this question is also very related to the heart and the visions of our organizations trying to do, right? So Think Policy as an organization believe that we want to achieve what we call as a good public policy ecosystem in Indonesia. So in order for you, for us especially, mostly our Indonesians here, to achieve a good public policy ecosystem, at least there are two parts that we have to address. The first part is the supply side. You need a good government, good politicians, good process in developing policies, which actually most of our work as a Think Policy is helping them, trying to train the government, trying to facilitate forum processes that allow more engaging, more deliberative process of policy making, as well as providing advice. But on the other end, there's a demand side. So how we can demand a good public policy if there's no citizens even know what a good public policy is? So imagine you're living in Indonesia where there's no good public transportations. Some of you here maybe is like quite privileged enough, traveling overseas, having a good education, living in a cities that has a functioning public transportations. But that's not the reality for most of Indonesians. And sometimes we need to create that kind of demand that, oh, because I'm working now, I need a good public transportations. I think the government needs to invest more in this public transportation. That allows the government to prioritize which good public policies that needs to be delivered to the citizens. So therefore, Think Policy also created what we call as a bijak movement, or the wise movement. So initially this movement started as a bijak memilih, vote wisely. Then the idea is, maybe it's quite different from what the other speakers talked about. It's not about fighting misinformation or disinformations, but actually picking the right informations for you to make an informed choice. So what we did during the Bijak Memilih was we created a framework. We call it the 3 steps framework. First one, know what you want. So because we initially targeted young, urban, middle class people, so at least what issues that you really care about. So based on our research and everything, we identified, for examples like the minority rights, environmental issues, workforce, and a couple of other stuffs, right? So after you know what exactly issues that you care about, we move to the which political parties that actually care with your issues. Because now, for example, if we ask many people here, I think the CSIs, I think we use one of the CSI's research as well for the basis of identifying the spectrum, the ideological spectrums, as well as the issues that the political parties care about. So we map those information so people, whenever they try to, oh, maybe I care about environment, so I would like to see which political parties that actually vote for environmentally inclined bill in the parliament. So after that, we created the third step is on the presidential candidates. Which presidential candidates that actually care about your issues based on all the research and all the verified informations that we can get from the internet as well as our partners. So those 3 steps actually are helping us to create what we call a movement called Vote Wisely or Bijak Memilih. So you need to vote based on what you know, what you care about, so you can make an informed decisions based on the information that is verified as well as can be accountable. So we initially thought that, well, maybe only 5,000 people or 10,000 people will visit these websites because we don't really think that we can fight the huge amount of disinformations or all the gimmicky content that will circulating around in the social media. But we were proven wrong. So we got like around for several months when we start launching all of these features to the public, we got around 11 million visits, 1.5 million unique users actually visiting and using this website to help them to get an informed choice. And you know, like Indonesian culture is SKS, you know, Sistem Kebut Semalam. So the night before the elections, like there's hundreds and thousands of users actually visiting our website to at least find out which presidential candidates or political parties that we should vote. So from this experiment, from these iterations, we decided to, of course, if we want to create a good demand of public policies, we cannot stop at elections, right? So we need to build further on this movement on how people can get engaged in a more informed way in the policy-making process or in the political process. So that's why we created what we call as a Bijak Demokrasi, as a consortium-based movement that try to invite all the organizations, profit, non-profit, who cares about democracy and well-informed citizens on how we can promote this type of civic activities for people to get a more informed choice in their political activities. So this Bijak Demokrasi consists of 4 sub-initiatives. So we call the first one is Bijak Pilkada. So we try to replicate what we did during the Bijak Memilih to the regional level. So we select around 10 or 20 priority regions, as well as there's some kind of features that allow maybe to get informations in one way or another for the rest. The second part is Bijak Memantau, or to monitor wisely. So once the new government being elected, we want to create a dashboard, a website that allows to track what policies they already promised and how they're being delivered so far, so we can have like a complete picture on the government performance on the key policy areas. The third one, we got the Sekolah Bijak, or the wise school. So we try to use our online learning platform so people, or like activists or researchers or the citizens who care about the issues, to really learn and have a deep dive of the various public policy issues so they can engage more actively. And the fourth one is the Komunitas Bijak. So this is the broader community to work, discuss, and have this kind of movement on a daily basis. So if your question is about how we can mainstream this political literacy, is what we did was through a different means. I think the first one is try to create what we call as a fact-solid website or platform, which the information is can be held accountable, so people can access, criticize, can look at, can refer at whenever they want to do some kind of actions. Initially, we did through this Bijak Memilih is provide this political candidacy informations, right? But throughout this Bijak Demokrasi, when we got this Bijak Memantau and other Bijak platform, we want to invite as many as people to really use this platform to get an informed decisions on whatever political activities they want to do. But of course, for the greater goods of the country. I think the first one is that. And the second one is to create an ecosystem of learners and also a strong community who believe in the cause, right? So that's why we move towards a consortium-based movement that allows many different parties to get invited and can collaborate on this platform to use this as a, maybe you can do the offline activations, you can do like seminars, engagement, workshops, and everything as a tool at your disposals to create this kind of literacy, political literacy at a larger scales. And I think the third one is on how we can invest more, of course, in the educational tool, right? Like for example, I told you about the Sekolah Bijak as part of after you get aware, after you get engaged, and then you get to learn on the various policy issues so you can get engaged in these political activities in more meaningful way. And I think I would like to close these notes to, I think we had a discussions, internal discussions with our brain trusts as well as with our advisors on, because the way that we did and organized is trying to fit into the Semangat Zaman or the zeitgeist, where we are governed by the algorithms, by the FYPs, and all of this social media trying to push us off the contents, right? And the way that we try to work on that is through equip people with the skills, equip people with the knowledge, equip people with the community so they can better consume those informations, right? But maybe there's like a new game that we have to think about on how the information should be presented to the people, right? Because this is beyond our control as the one who do the political literacy education program and activism. I think that's the questions that we can ponder upon, especially because we try to deal with the short attention span. We deal with a lot of, for example, FYP and stuff, which I think is very difficult for us. Especially we try to give nuances of the policy issues, and sometimes to engage meaningfully, you have to have a good understanding at a certain level, but it's very hard to achieve it through this algorithm-driven and short attention span kind of environment that we are currently living in. But I think this is something that we can discuss further if any of you try to join the Bijak Demokrasi movement.
Right,
I think that's my question, my answer, Pak.
For fascinating work that Think Policy has done. Now we have one discussion, and I'd like to ask Pak Andy Bayuni. He's on the Meta Oversight Board and well-respected senior journalist in Indonesia, previously held position at the Jakarta Post. Could someone provide microphone to Bang Andy Bayuni? Oh, you've got one. Thank you. Like our speaker, you only have 5 minutes to comment on this amazing thought from our speakers on the stage. Pak Andy.
Thank you, Philips, and thank you for very wonderful presentations. I think everyone gave suggestions on how SAIL can move forward with policies, with research. I just have 2 short comments. One, something that I think Jean-Jacques mentioned briefly, but I thought I'd like to emphasize. It's about the freedom of speech, which has been discussed, but not extensively, but I think it's important when we talk about internet safety and freedom. And the second point that I want to make is about the Pan-ASEAN collaboration on fighting against disinformation and misinformation. Now, I think freedom of opinion and freedom of expression is very important. When we talk about fighting misinformation and disinformation, we should not also forget that we should protect free speech, right? I can tell you from my experience at the Oversight Board of Meta, I'm not an employee of Meta. It's an independent oversight board. And in Meta, I think we found a lot of over-enforcement and a lot of under-enforcement. Yeah, so contents that are actually legitimate are being taken down in large scale, and contents that are bad are being left up, again, in large scales. And the problem is precisely because we talk about scale. Right? We talk about 2 billion postings every day that Meta has to handle, and they've done a good job, but still there will be enforcement errors, over-enforcement or under-enforcement, and the number is still huge. And I'm sure this is a problem that other platforms also find. So, and how do we deal with that? Of course, take down and lift up, they have the community guidelines, and they're trying their best, but we know it's not good enough. At the Oversight Board, I think we use the reference of international human rights laws on contents that should be taken down or should be left up. There is the Article 19 of the ICCPR, and Indonesia has ratified that, which tells you that you have to protect free speech, but there are exceptions that when you actually can postpone free speech, and they have this the 3-part test based on law, legitimate aim, and necessary. And then once you decide that you want to remove free speech, there is also the suggestion that you have to go with the least intrusive measures. That's important, and there are other international human rights laws that can be used when you talk about fighting misinformation and disinformation. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, basically. I mean, the laws are there, and they are already tested, and these are universal. You talk about principles that can be applied across the globe. I think many of these international human rights laws are universal. Of course, then the implementation will probably be different in different countries depending on the context. Now, on the Pan-ASEAN collaboration, I was disheartened to discover that 4 member states are not signatory or have ratified the ICCPR. ICCPR, I think, is a good product, and I'm happy that Indonesia has signed and ratified. It's a good product. It actually forces you to make commitment on protection human rights, and Article 19 of ICCPR is talking about freedom of expression. So if we have that, I think it would be easier if all 10 member states of ASEAN sign and ratify that, and we talk about collaboration. The problem now is that because each member countries have different commitments to freedom of speech, so 4 countries, I should name them, Brunei, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Singapore, they have not signed. So I think as part of the SAIL work and advocacy, maybe should also try to get the other 4 ASEAN members to sign and ratify it. And then we can talk about common policies or collaboration with similar commitment to freedom of expression. So that's important. So I think moving ahead, a lot of recommendations here, but just bear in mind that we should also protect free speech as we try to fight the maladies of misinformation and disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bagandi. Please join me in thanking all the speakers and discussants for their amazing views. We do still have 7 minutes, but I think I will not do justice if I throw to the audience to ask questions, but rather I'm going to ask all the speakers 1 minute each. What would be your takeaways from this event today, and what would be your suggestion in the 1 minute? Pak Jonathan, start with you.
Thank you very much, Philip. I think that the key takeaway that I would like to also, register here and share with you is that the emphasis on evidence-based approaches and practices. And this is something that I think we need to generate a greater body of research that really address developments unique to our region. Because there have been many, global studies and analyses out there, which I think is well and good, but it's coming to an inflection point where I think that we need to stress how we can actually help also our think tanks and researchers to champion more local and targeted research on issues and matters and concerns that are unique to our region. And if I may just also address Park's question and concern there earlier, I think in ASEAN itself, the nexus between, say, human rights and fighting disinformation is being strengthened, actually being done and carried out by the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. There have been very frank dialogues going on there with regards to how we want to ensure that in the fight against disinformation, that human rights are also not compromised, and the freedom on the internet and press is also being protected. I think that's very important. I think we recognize that as well. So I think my 1 minute is up here, but thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Next to you, Pak.
Okay, so let's start with the meaning of the digital transformations and informations handling transformations is not an objective, but it is a process. So I believe that this event is one of the process that we are transforming to answer the challenges, the current challenges of the disinformation and misinformation itself. And then, so by the research involvement of this, and also for the socializations to the people of Indonesia, I think that's one of the key takeaways.
Thank you, Pak Yoga. Next to you, Jack.
Thank you. I think what struck me is we seem to agree that there needs to be dialogue and multi-stakeholder dialogue, but also listening to the various panelists, I can tell that we could do more in terms of information sharing of each other. And so I would love to move from discussions like this, which are effectively one-offs, to much more ongoing exchanges. And we could think about a model like the IGF, right? So you've got the UN's Internet Governance Forum, which is multi-stakeholder by nature. So you don't have, governments standing over there and doing their own little thing and coming up with their little treaty or whatever they want, with input or without input. You don't have industry doing its own thing. Everybody sits around a table. And that model's worked relatively well. It could do better. But the good thing is that it's also trickled down to both the regional level with the Asia-Pac IGF and then national level. We see that with the Indonesian IGF. And I wonder if maybe we can think of doing something like that. We've got the ASEAN platform, and I think maybe we can see how we could make this even more successful, regular, etc. But I think we do need national platforms as well, so we can have action at the local level. So I hope we can build on that in coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Jean-Jacques. Pak Miklos?
Thank you. To me, the most surprising figure in the presentations we heard today was that 24% that CSI has mentioned, only 24% of Indonesians check before they forward an information. Now, I think we don't mean fact-checking because, of course, people are not going to be fact-checkers, but just to do a simple Google search, right? So what can we do collectively to increase that number? To have what kind of education, communication, all that, all the stakeholders who are here today, if we could work together to get more people to do that. Because in most cases, this disinformation and hate speech is actually passed on as misinformation, right? A lot of the people who are conveyors of this message believe it to be true. Only the originators had sort of the bad intent. So that's one thing. The second thing is just how quickly time passes. Jean, you mentioned about WHO's content during COVID that, Google then put on the top of all the searches. And yeah, COVID seems like another era, but it wasn't that long ago. Whether these kind of partnerships are possible in so many other areas, again, for everybody to work together and get somewhere. Because if only we could make those people who spread the disinformation insignificant, it wouldn't matter. I mean, they can have thousands and thousands of pages of this, millions, as long as nobody gets to them, tough luck. We are not there yet.
Thank you, Miklos. Mbak Anita Wahid.
Yeah, I still believe in diversity, that it is a strength. And I still believe that we can create a lot of greatness based on diversity. Because by the nature of diversity, it means that we have much more options to choose from, which means that we have quite a lot of possibility to explore. But if we want to start using diversity as strength, as a foundation to build greatness, then we need to look at it seriously, not on the surface level, not only on the surface level, but actually really, really build the foundations of what it means to be a diverse nation, what it means to be part of a small community, but also a bigger one, what it means to be to have a connection between us as a group, as an individual, and as a nation, as a society, and what it means to actually have a really, really strong bond with one another. Actually, if we can create that in Indonesia, in other Southeast Asian countries, then we become much more resilient towards disinformation and hate speech. That is actually one of the things that we can approach for our resilience towards other types of malicious intents within the digital sphere.
Thank you, Mas Pras.
Okay.
The last
20 seconds.
20 seconds.
So I think the ones, like Pak Miklos, I think the one graph that strikes me is the number of people who verified the information is very low, considerably very low. And the second one is how correlated disinformations with the trust in democracy. So I think the key takeaways that I see from this event is whatever activisms, political activisms, or whatever promotions of good things that we want to do in life, or in Indonesia in case, or in the region, we are still bounded by this reality of not a lot of people actually verifying facts. And second is how correlated our way of consuming information with our trust in democracy, in our society. So I hope that we can collaborate more and foster a healthy way of consuming informations, because if we can invest in literacy, in the culture of good information consumptions, in a culture of good information generations, I think it will help us in the long run to better having a healthy, trusting society in the future. That's all.
Thank you. Now we've reached the end of the session. I hope the conversation we have triggers more ideas, and then triggers more willingness for all of us, private sector, civil society, government, regional decision makers, and then those who are working at the global level as well, in finding, a solution, quote unquote, if you will, to this global problem that we have. And I remember I'd like to quote, I forgot who said this earlier during the keynote speakers session. It is our shared challenges, and we have to find joint solutions, because no countries can solve this problem alone. Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause once again to our speakers, and I return the microphone to our MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our moderator, speakers. Please remain on the stage to take a group photo together. Please kindly stand up to take a picture together. The photographer, please on your position. And to all speakers, kindly look at the center of the camera. We are going to take a picture twice, like before. The first one is the formal pose. 1, 2, and 3. And the second one, free pose as you like, please. 1, 2. Okay, so we would like to invite to join us on the stage. Okay, Bapak, please join us on the stage. Thank you so much. Okay, the first session. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Second one, free pose, please. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, please give a big round of applause to our moderator and to our speakers. Thank you so much, Bapak Philips C. Vermonte, for being an amazing moderator for today's event and for the enlightening session. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for taking time to join us today and participating this exceptional event. And I believe we have gained so much information, insights that I believe that it will be beneficial to each and every one of us. So, for this information, this seminar is hosted by Saver Internet Lab and the Department of Politics and Social Change at CSIS in partnership with Google Indonesia. We extend our heartfelt thanks to all our distinguished guests for attending today, and please stay updated and connected with SAIL future initiatives in the coming year by following us on social media and visiting our website at Saver Internet Lab. So ladies and gentlemen, please we close this event with a big round of applause to SAIL Dialogue on Internet Safety. Thank you so much. I'm Suci Bhatia and wishing you all have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.